in broad terms, we're looking at Trump being tougher on trade, but we don't know in which way, and also this zero-sum mindset that could drive policy. Look, we're a little bit out of time, but I'm just going to extend this into a round or two of audience participation for 5 or 10 minutes. If you have any comments or questions, please raise your hand.
I'm from Tsinghua University, China. Today I would like to ask, my question is, do you think this is the good opportunity for the current Thai government to improve relations with the US? Since President Trump seemed to value the universal value like democracy or human rights less than Hillary Clinton. Thank you.
Okay. And my question is from Mr. Kerry. That recently Mr. Steve Bannon from White House said that US will not allow China to roam freely in the South China Sea, and it has extremely subjective claims in the South China Sea. So how would you see the legitimacy of US in the South China Sea and its possible impacts on the regional security of the ASEAN?
My name is Alex. I'm American, but I'm also at the University of Freiburg, studying here for the semester. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mr. Gershaneck. It's really nice to have a different viewpoint. And I wanted to ask, for the Center for Strategic International Studies, you talked about more interaction expected in this part of the world, and in terms of human rights, I was wondering what your stance or what your organization's stance is, and what your expectation is for the new administration in human rights in this part of the world. Thank you.
Okay, can you just pass the microphone over to the gentleman there? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I'm Minister Counselor Han from South Korean Embassy, and I'd like to ask a question to Kun Kerry with regard to the strategic impatience from the Obama administration. What kind of move the new Trump administration is going to take in the future to the North Korea?
Okay, I think that's a good round. Any other hand? I think we just have time for one round. Okay. So I think 3 questions for Kerry Gershneck. And they're all good questions, but let me first take the Thai-US angle. I think it's already been mentioned that there's some recalibration, but is this really the window of opportunity to reshape and regain some new balance for the bilateral relations? Big read, a quick one.
Well, yes, definitely. But I have to remind you that human rights issue remains central to Thai-US relation, and Thailand also give importance to human rights. We have a lot of problems related to human rights violation, and we already ratify tortures, and also we are going to ratify the enforced disappearance. And so these are the things. I don't think you will lower the standard of human rights. Thailand is very serious in trying to improve it. But I don't think the Trump administration will pick on it. That's important. You talk to the Thais nicely, quietly. That's what Australia has done, New Zealand has done, they like that. So I think Thai-US relation can progress, can expand the scope very quickly because they have 184 years of relations, actually go beyond 200 years. So the good view and the long-standing relation value that we share as part of the free worlds and open society, that should be enough to propel this relation.
Do you think that the Trump administration's recalibration of values and interests will be followed by other countries or should be followed by other countries?
No, I think each country has their own approach. Some of the leading countries in the Western world, like European Union, is very hard-hitting on Thailand, but not on the countries like Australia. They are hard-hitting, but they know how to approach the Thai. This is important. Japan has a very strong view on human rights, but when they approach Thailand, it's differently. So I think America under Trump will be less picky on the human rights, but that does not mean it does not value human rights, and that does not mean Thailand will lower the standard. Thailand will continue because the Thai people want human rights respect. That is why you have human rights defender. You have in Thailand. One thing is good. You write about human rights, you get a reward. Okay. They cannot put you to jail because Phil will talk about it. Okay.
Okay, Kerry, you'll be the last to respond. I'm going to save you, but I'll say now that also the Thai policymakers and people in higher places, they also feel that in this period, Thailand has been going through a profound transition, and hence the U.S. should have been more understanding of this. But now I think the transition is more or less has been completed. Still some left, but so maybe there's also recalibration on the Thai side as well. I want to bring Phil in just a little bit on the human rights. So do you think is Trump going to be worse? Is he going to value kind of interests over human rights, and is that a worry for us?
I think that, unfortunately, we're not going to see the same degree of attention we've seen on human rights, particularly on civil and political rights issues here in Thailand that we saw from the Obama administration. I think that the Trump administration is going to have other issues that they want to talk to Thailand about, whether it be trade, whether it be military cooperation. Obviously the sending of the head of the Pacific Command of the U.S. to attend Cobra Gold for the first time, I think probably sends the wrong signal at this time in terms of human rights. It basically says, okay, you guys are going to get away with it. And unfortunately, that's, I think, the message that's going to be interpreted within the top levels of the government. I think that Thailand is doing some interesting things on human rights. I mean, I would agree that, they're doing a lot on human trafficking. I would agree that, they have, of course, a gender equality act that is actually leading in the region in terms of LGBT rights. So it's not a completely black or white picture about what's happening in Thailand on human rights. But I just don't see an overarching interest within the U.S. government under Donald Trump to push this. And, for all the discussion about, quiet diplomacy, you have to have quiet diplomacy and public diplomacy. All quiet diplomacy basically says is, yeah, we're going to talk about it, but, you can basically say no to us and nobody will find out about it. And that, unfortunately, is what has been happening here. I think finally I would say that if you want to see a really clear picture of the situation, human rights in Thailand, I'd encourage you to go to the Bangkok Arts Center. There's a very good exhibition that's funded by the government of Canada. It's called Those Who Died Trying. And it's photos of 50 human rights defenders who have been killed since 1992. The vast majority of those cases have not been solved in any meaningful way. So when you talk about, outside of Bangkok, what is happening on human rights, go take a look at that photo exhibition and you'll really see what's happening.
Thank you, Phil. Now, just a couple minutes left. If I may, Kerry, there are two questions that have to do with the U.S.-China relationship. One on Northeast Asia. North Korea has gone through 5 nuclear tests now. This year they're talking about ICBM. And Steve Bannon said that Trump said that it's not going to happen. It won't happen. The North Korean nuclear issue and also the ICBM delivery of nuclear weapons to North America. And there's also South China Sea. So if you look around the region, the key flashpoints now in the Northeast, there's the Korean Peninsula, the Kim Jong-un regime, the nuclear question, the ICBM now, and then you come down to Taiwan, the cross-strait relations. The U.S. is pressing China a little bit. Mr. Trump spoke with President Tsai, created a lot of waves, and now the Trump administration talking about maybe supporting Tibet a little bit, at least a dialogue between the Tibetan government in exile with Beijing. And then South China Sea, I think Steve Bannon said that China is not going to rule the South China Sea, that there will be pushback from the U.S. So this is early brinkmanship now between U.S. and China, and the early days. But who's going to blink first? I think the Chinese, we can be sure that they will test and they're not going to back down. But the U.S. also will try to push back. What do you think, Kerry? 2 questions on U.S.-China, China and South China Sea, North Korean nuclear question, and then of course finally the human rights, will they be abandoned? Will human rights be abandoned by the Trump administration?
Okay, 3 easy questions. I'll make it quick. No. Okay, look, let's start with the human rights issue first, if I can. One of the reasons there were a number of us criticizing the Obama administration after May 22nd of 2014 was the overzealous response to the coup. Again, my Thai friends were saying, look, we bled with you on the fields of the battlefields of Korea, the Plain of Jars and Laos. We were there in Vietnam, we were there in the War on Terror. We're having bad times here, we think we're going into civil war, and you treat us like the ugly American. You treat us like a little brown brother by constantly insulting us in public, humiliating us, and so the point of the criticism was, one, it was immature and unprofessional, or we should have known better than the way we approached our longtime ally. But number two, and this is the thinking of people on the National Security Council, I know, you also want to be careful, not just because you're dealing with a longtime friend and ally and you try to understand the needs and try to work with them, but also don't give them a reason to go into the arms of totalitarian or authoritarian regimes and use that security, that comfort that you get when you've been pushed into those arms to justify continued repression, continued censorship, continued violation of human rights. And things like abductions overseas. So that was, and again, I know some of the people personally on the National Security Council staff who we had those conversations at the time, and now they're on that staff, so I know that is their thinking. There's several dimensions to this, but again, one of them is, of course, you want to make sure that we keep Thailand in a position, help Thailand stay in a position where it doesn't feel like it has to ally only with an authoritarian or arguably totalitarian regime, okay? Because that gives justification for all those rights abuses that we talked about, if for those who would choose to seek them. So that is the thinking I know firsthand from talking with some of those. South China Sea is the global commons. I don't need to tell everyone in this room how much trade passes through there, the fact that those are international seas. Look what happened when the PRC put an air defense zone in the East China Sea. Is it illegal? No. Could they do it? The airlines are compliant with it. The airlines are in effect saying, we're going to check in with China, even though they don't own that terrain. They don't own those skies, those waters. Just to be safe, we're going to check in. So you apply an ADIZ, which I think the PRC will do sometime fairly soon. There's going to be a major test for Trump really soon. There is every administration. The Bush 2 got his. Everybody thinks it was the P3 incident where the PLA fighter buzzed a propeller-driven aircraft and collided with it. Everyone thinks that was the first incident. It wasn't. There were 77 increasingly aggressive passes on American vessels and ships before the PLA fighter collided with the P3, and pilot got killed, of course, but the P3 almost crashed as well, almost killed all the crew members. There had been 77 other attempts before that, and that was early in the Bush administration. The USS Impeccable was China's first test of President Obama. We didn't pass because, again, our ship got rammed and we did nothing about it. We just said, oh, that's okay, those things happen, basically. And so everyone in this administration who's in the national security side knows there was going to be a test and it was going to be early. And will it be in the South China Sea? Will it be the little blue men? We have the little green men in the Ukraine. Well, in the South China Sea, the maritime militia is the little blue men. Will it be one of those attacks with aircraft smashing into a non-Navy vessel, smashing into a U.S. vessel? Will it be firing? We don't know, but something's going to happen here. But the point is, we can't back off on the South China Sea, because once it becomes just the PRC's lake by virtue of the so-called 9-dash line, then what's next? The Gulf of Thailand. You had a minister from China who was down in Australia recently claiming that the Chinese had visited Australia, and we were in these waters years ago. If all you have to do to claim ownership of a major body of water, in the case of the SCS, 2.5 times the size of the Mediterranean Sea, if all you have to do to claim ownership of that is say, well, you know, we traveled there over the years and we drew this map with the dots on it, then how long is it before the Gulf of Siam or the Gulf of Thailand? It's, oh yeah, we were traveling there over the thousands of years as well. That's ours too. So you've got to stand up, and we've got to, in some way, indicate, do we need to do it through kinetic means? Do we need to do it through shooting? No. Let's not. We don't want to go that route. But there has to be stronger pushback than there has been thus far. And Nico, I'm sorry I don't have a solution to Korea. Anyone who thinks that they have the solution to Kim Jong-un in the North Korea situation is either drunk or lying, because everyone who's claimed to have it right over the years, on the US side at least, I can speak to that, my own organization has been very heavily involved with the Republic of Korea and working quietly with North Korea as well. Every time we thought we had it right, we didn't. The frustration with the Trump administration is with the strategic patience approach, and all you got by that was increasing capability of Pyongyang to launch, and those of you from Japan who are here, if there's anybody from Japan, you know all it takes is 3 nukes to end your civilization as you know it. So right now, Kim Jong-un has capabilities to destroy the countries right next to him, and has the capability to hit the United States. It's one of the reasons that Secretary of Defense Mattis is in your country this week, is to work out more effective responses. Try something new that has not been tried. That's all I can say. Dr. Thitinan, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a point to conclude. Look, I think there's a ongoing realignment and recalibration and a new kind of geopolitical game in Asia, in the broad Asia. And we have to wait and see. We're watching very carefully the Trump administration's rhetoric, if and how it will be substantiated. The Obama administration, we saw less substantiation, less backup, less muscle. But if the Trump administration means what it says, then we can expect tension, maybe some confrontation, and maybe even some conflict going forward. But for Thailand, and I said this, you know, when the world runs amok, Thailand does relatively okay compared to the others in the region. And I think that there's going to be a recalibration in Thailand itself if the others are realigning and if Thai-US relations are going to be recalibrated. So please join me. We will continue this conversation on March 2nd, Asian Views on America's Role in Asia, AVARA project. We will have a panel here on March 2nd in the morning. But in the meantime, please join me in thanking our speakers for their views and positions on time. Thank you very much. Thank you.